You saw on the 1B step video tutorial that we have several options to create distribution range maps. In this tutorial, I will try to give you some guidance on how to draw the best possible range map. The general rule is that you should try different options and iteratively adjust the parameters to get to the map that best describes your species range. In other words, there are no golden scientific rules on what you should do. You should rather use your expertise on the species to get as close as possible to your idea of the species distribution. It is also important to acknowledge that while we try to automatize range map creation to make it faster for you, the created map will rarely be perfect, so you can always, and maybe should, edit that shapefile in your favorite GIS software before submitting it with your assessment. Let's start with an easy case. If you have only one locality where the species is present, or a few distinct localities. In that case, you might want to draw circles around localities. Select individual localities and define a buffer around those localities. As the buffer overlaps with the sea here, and the species is strictly terrestrial, you can crop by land. When you have at least 3 localities, you can also use minimum convex polygon and alpha hulls. Minimum convex polygon will draw the largest polygon that could be made around your occurrence records. It can be a good option when the shape of the distribution of your species is quite simple. When the minimum convex polygon includes parts that should clearly be excluded, you can use the alpha hull, which allows for some concave incursions within the polygon. Depending on the parameter, you can adjust here. See the sRedList documentation for more details on that parameter. The higher the parameter, the closer the polygon will be to a minimum convex polygon. When you decrease the parameter, you will allow for some more concave incursions, and at some point you will also have multiple splitted polygons. For both minimum convex polygon and alpha hull options, we advise to use a buffer around the occurrence record and, if relevant, to crop by land for terrestrial species, by sea for marine species, or by elevation. If you have many occurrence records, you can also use kernels. Kernels will map the area that will include a random observation of your species with a probability corresponding to that value. If you choose a high value, for instance 0.99, it means that almost any new observation of that species should fall within the polygon. The polygon will thus be quite large around occurrence records. Conversely, if you define a lower value, the area will be tighter around occurrence records and exclude some of them. In general, you should use a higher value when you think the species is poorly sampled, and a smaller value if you think the occurrence records are quite homogeneously distributed around the true species distribution. It is not mandatory, but in some cases, using a buffer could improve the distribution, as well as cropping by land, sea, or elevation. Finally, if you are working on freshwater species, you should use hydrobasins to create your range map. The most common option will be to use hydrobasins of level 8, which is the standard for red listing. But in some specific cases, where the species has a very small range, level 10 or 12 might be used. Note that levels 10 and 12 won't work if your species has a large range. For some common species that are widespread but poorly sampled, using hydrobasins overlapping with occurrence records will lead to a very incomplete map. In that case, you can use hydrobasin within MCP that will include all hydrobasins of level 8 overlapping with the minimum convex polygon around occurrence records. For all hydrobasins options, we do not advise to buffer, crop, or merge the polygon range map. It makes more sense to keep the hydrobasin shapes unaltered. Since version 1.2, you can also draw a buffer around the coastline for coastal species. For this, you must specify a buffer size and crop by land or by sea. If you do not manage to create exactly the shape you want, you will be able to edit the range map manually, as you can see in tutorial video on Polygon range map editing. Feel free to provide us some feedback if you see something is missing, so that we can complete the mapping functionalities.